You're listening to the Joyous podcast with Mike Carden, where we talk to the world's most interesting business thinkers about life and work and life. Today's guest is Nate Edwards. For show notes and other content referenced in this podcast, visit joyoushq.com/podcast. And now, here's Mike.
Hello, welcome to the Joyous Work podcast, where we talk work and making work great. I'm Mike Carden, co-founder of Joyous, and my guest today is Nate Edwards. Nate's LinkedIn bio starts with this line: with a degree in English education and the ability to translate Middle English, what else could I do but build a career in IP technology and telecommunications? I couldn't write a better introduction myself, so I just used that one. A very warm welcome to the podcast, Nate.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Hey, frequent listeners will know that I love to start off with the guest's origin story, as Marvel would put it. When we chatted last week, I discovered that your path has some quite unexpected turns. So why don't you take us right back to the beginning, Nate?
Sure. I'll give you the quick flyby. So when I went to college, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer in the beginning. And then when I realized, talking to a couple of lawyers and how much time you have to spend actually just doing paralegal type work, I decided that wasn't for me. Got into some teaching and I just fell in love with it. I was an English major to begin with, so that was natural for me. When I graduated, I taught high school English, including advanced placement. And then there were some challenges getting jobs in Connecticut at that time. That's where I grew up. And the phone company was hiring. So a friend of mine suggested that I take a job so that I can get paid and live indoors and eat and put gas in my car. I said, just do this for a little while until you get the right teaching job. And so I went for that. I started as a technician, and I remember day one was pole climbing. And being afraid of heights, I went, what did I get myself into? So you had to go up 18 feet on a pole and hang off, and there were no safety, anything. Today, it's safe. You can't fall. Back then, if you fell off the pole, you fell off the pole. So there was a little more skin in the game, if you will. But I just said to myself, it's something I have to do. And I did it, and I got past it. And then my first management job shortly thereafter was doing training. So I had to learn electrical engineering and digital transmission. And so that kind of teaching background just brought me into education, but in a more technical side. And after a couple of years, I had a couple of promotions. One of my favorite teaching jobs came up, one I really wanted. And at that point, it was a 50% pay cut. And wow. I just never looked back. And so that was my humble beginnings, getting into the phone company. And it's just been fantastic for me ever since.
How does the step from getting into the phone company? I have to stop for 1 second here. When you said like you were up poles, it always makes me laugh whenever you talk to people in the software field and they describe like people doing what I'll call loosely real work. So yeah, I'm not saying the software engineers aren't doing real work, but yeah, real work. They always go, oh, people up poles. It's like the definition of someone doing work in the field. But tell me, how did you go from the kind of teaching role within AT&T, right? How did you go
at
from
the
that?
time? It was S&ET before all the purchases happened. Yeah,
right. Well, that's dating you. So
it sure is.
So how did you go from that to where you are today? Right, you're up poles, and then here we are, a couple of decades later, you're an SVP.
Yeah, it's not a common path for folks to start out in bargaining unit, if you will, and work their way all the way up. It just happened for me. When I was doing as an English major, what I excelled in was analyzing literature, just looking for different connections, either from history in the time period or other writings to find meaning and create a new interpretation of something. Well, I took that same skill set, that same thinking, and I just looked at problems in the phone company and looked at different things other people were doing to create a new whole, a new way of thinking about something or solving a problem. And I found that I got really good at that. And so the jobs I just kept going to were, we have a big problem, we need innovation, we need different thinking, how do we go solve it? And that became my role, and it became my brand after a while. And I just kept moving from problem after problem. And my joke was always, people would ask me, are you a double E? And I would say, yeah, English education, of course.
It's a fascinating thing, that kind of applying different thinking bit, right? Because that's what you're describing, right? This bit where you have a background of one thing, you apply it to something else. And it's almost a trope, right? It's something you sort of, it's almost a trope. But I was reading about the history of higher education maybe 500, 600 years ago when these universities in the UK at that time, like the big universities, and apparently everyone is a generalist. So if you're, I'm going to use Isaac Newton. If you're Isaac Newton, you studied classics and you studied Greek philosophy and so on. And then, of course, you started to specialize in physics. But if you went to like a faculty kind of meetup, you would meet people in all these other disciplines. And so there was, it's that kind of crossover of ideas apparently led to so much of the expansive thinking that was happening. Whereas these days, I've got a very close friend, and she's just finished her PhD in a couple of specific pathogens related to bovine tuberculosis. And she goes to a conference about that with 20 other people that talk about that. That sense of generalism has maybe disappeared a little.
Yeah, it has. I think people are really deep now for the most part.
Hey, one of the things I got from that too about being up the poles is that's a real sense of empathy, presumably, for all of those folk in field services that you work with. And it might be interesting for the listeners just to explain that the title is Enterprise Field Operations and Service Delivery, but what does that actually mean? What is that workforce like?
Sure. I have two general kinds of folks in my organization, what I call, quote, techs and trucks, as most people think about it. They work in our gateways. They work on the equipment that looks a lot like a data center. They manage the facilities, the generators, the HVACs, the battery strings, the things that keep those facilities running. And then we've got the techs that roll out, and they'll go out and do locates, and they'll go out and do installs on customer prem for businesses, enterprises. And then I've got the other type of folks who are more your inside folks, and they do our customer relations. So talking to our enterprise customers and our mid-markets customers. They do provisioning of services like waves or dedicated internet access or things like that. And generally speaking, make that stuff work. And then I've got the staff support that comes up with all the reporting and processes and things that make everyone's jobs easier.
Oh, interesting. Do you want to just talk me through how you use Joyous? I mean, there seems to be, every time I talk to someone about this, there's a different nuance. I love hearing from kind of customers about what their sort of mental frame is on using it.
Sure. My first interaction with Joyous was at a previous company. I remember talking to your brother, Philip, and he pitched this. We knew each other from way back when in the early days of IP-based television. And he said, hey, we're working on this thing. Can you take a look at it for me? I said, sure. And I went through it, and I saw the ability to communicate with people real time, more like text, because that's how folks were starting to communicate at that time. And then you could see heat maps and what have you. And I said, wow, this gives me access to information and interpretation that you would have to send out a survey and then go line by line and interpret everything. And it did it for me. And I said, you know what? At the time, I was working on process improvement and tooling improvement and workforce improvement, same kind of field technicians. And we were rolling out new modems. And oftentimes the new modems would have a lot of defects, and it would take us months, 3, 4, 5 months to figure out all the bugs. And so I said, well, let's take this and use it for this use case to go, how do we get immediate feedback from our technicians? And not just one way, because your survey, you kind of ask a question and most people don't comment. Well, we sent the survey out to our technician base, and we got flooded with, hey, I'm seeing this, we've got this issue. And the tool gave us the opportunity to just respond back quickly. Hey, can you say more? What do you mean by that? Can you give me some details? Do you have any pictures? And we got all the bugs worked out of that modem launch within 45 days. It was never done before. And huge cost savings to the company, because now, and a customer satisfier, by the way, it works on both sides. But we got all the defects out very quickly, and our customers aren't dealing with those defects while we fix them and figure them out. And it became a best practice for us. And so when I had the opportunity to engage with Joyous again, it was the same approach. I used that first. It worked before. We were rolling out again, new modems, same kind of story. It worked perfectly. And then I started recognizing very quickly that our customer or our technician engagement scores were going up. And it was really hard to move a union workforce and engagement. And it dawned on me really quickly is, in the interest of us trying to improve the experience for our techs and for our customers and our cost structure, techs were feeling heard. They were feeling like somebody cared about their opinion. So all of a sudden now we're connecting with our workforce in ways we couldn't before at scale. And we're collaborating with them at scale. And that led to them having a sense of somebody cares about me and cares what I think. And it started showing up in our employee engagement scores. And so then we were like, oh my gosh, this is opening a world for us. Let's engage them more in other things, not just the technical pieces. And it's just been a completely different way of engaging the workforce. The response rates are 2-3x of what we normally get in a survey. So we're reaching people, they're engaging, and they're feeling valued. And that was like a byproduct. And I know you guys think of it like your core competency, but we were thinking of it like a byproduct. And it's just been fantastic for us.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by one thing, right? And this is particularly, it's almost a truism in large unionized workforces. There's this idea that you're either doing something that's great for the enterprise or you're doing something that's great for the employee, and they're never the same thing. It was almost like I was taught that in business school. And it's the complete opposite of what we find, right? And so that thing you were like, you'll read these things about a process which we improve, right? And that process, I don't know, just removes some kind of piece of frustration from the employee's day. And that frustration, now they're not going home and talking to their spouse or partner about, right? And that's, you'll hear the HR term of employee experience, but that's real employee experience. It's the stuff which it's those frustrations that get removed and so on. And so initially for us, we were surprised that oftentimes you improve a process for an employee and it's something they're going, oh, I've always wanted this to be fixed. And it makes their job easier. And of course, it creates some kind of operational efficiency for the business. And that seems to be the case most of the time, right? That those things are aligned. But then you've got that other bit, which you mentioned, which is that employee who's felt frustrated because they're not listened to, suddenly sort of is listened to. And it's saying it out loud. It's just obvious, isn't it? Like that, of course. And it's interesting listening to you talk about it because you use the term care several times in that piece. Yeah, do you think that this is a way that you can actually, it's mechanical, but you can show more care for the employee?
Absolutely. I mean, if you've watched Ted Lasso, we didn't have Ted Lasso back then, where when Ted walks in and he asks everybody what's going on and they say, well, there's no water pressure in the shower. And one of the first things he and Beard do is fix the water pressure in the shower. And everyone's, holy cow, they listen to us, they fix something. We didn't have that role model back then. And so when you tried to survey people
didn't have
before,
the Ted Lasso role model.
We didn't have the Ted Lasso role model. And so at surveys before, you would either bring a handful of text together, or you would survey a small sample and you'd get even a smaller response. So very few techs knew you were asking anybody anything, and very few of them were contributing. And in this way, we got so many more people. And the number one complaint on engagement surveys is, I don't think anyone's doing anything with my feedback, right? They just, that's the number one thing. I'm giving you this, but I don't think anyone's reading it. And the reason is they send something in, it's one way, and they never really have a way to get communication back. Well, when they send feedback into us through Joyous, we're responding immediately. And I think many of them are surprised that anyone's going to actually read and respond, and it's a live person on the other end. And it's, oh my gosh, you're listening to me. And the comment is, you care what I have to say because you're taking your time to do that. And then when they see the change, you get the Ted Lasso effect. You've got folks going, well, if I give them feedback, they'll fix it. And at first it'll be silly things just to see if they'll do it. But then it'll get serious that we're working together, not against each other. And I think that's where that caring comes in. Listening is caring. Communicating is caring, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I just have to segue to Ted Lasso for a second.
Sure.
So who's the real driver of change? Is it Beard or Ted?
It's hard to know because in some cases they play the different roles. And what Ted would say is, whoever wants to play the role today, play the role today, right?
Pretty good
You're
answer.
all leader and a follower at any given moment.
Apparently, a bunch of the people who are actually the main characters in that show were kind of writers, and they couldn't cast. So Roy Keane, they couldn't cast someone, and then literally one of the writers said, "Oh, I'll do it." I love that. Such a great pandemic story, Ted Lasso, isn't it? Anyway, sorry, I digressed badly into Ted Lasso. So one of the things that you mentioned there was this thing of involving people. It's a fascinating thing for me is that if we look in our telco clients, yourself included, telco and cable clients, there is initially this thing of like, you want to fight what I describe as survey fatigue. So you don't want to keep asking people all the time for input. So you tend to select a cohort of people and you talk to them. It's interesting. And we know the math, right? We know what sample size you need to get the right kind of, we know all that piece. So we know that sometimes you go to a subset of the audience and so on. It's been fascinating to me recently, and I'm interested in your opinion on this. When we talk into our healthcare clients, particularly people in hospital systems, and we'll say to them, oh, you only need to talk to, I don't know, 10% of the audience for this particular thing. They'll come back and go, oh no, we want to talk to 100% of the audience, because the point to them is not that they just want to get the best possible quality data, but they actually want to engage the most possible people in anything, particularly if it's related to kind of healthcare transformation. Does that same thing apply in your world, Nate?
It does, especially when you've got remote folks like we do today. Our technicians are spread out across the country, and even our non-technicians are working from home for the most part, and they're spread out. Any time you have an opportunity to bring them into problem solving makes people feel more connected. And so I agree with you. We won't blast the entire organization with something, because typically we target specific topics, but we try to target everybody in the group associated with that topic, and it creates that sense of connectedness. And I talked about my time as a technician. When I was in the union, you got indoctrinated day one that it's us against them. It's us against the company, right? They're trying to put one over on us. Our job is to give it right back, kind of thing. And it creates that adversarial relationship, which there shouldn't be one and doesn't need to be one. And then when you find that you can make those connections, my time as a technician gives me kind of instant street cred. So if I go out in the field and I can pull out a pair of shears and I can strip a wire back or rack a piece of gear and show them I know what I'm talking about and I've done their job, I have that immediate empathy, that immediate connection with, oh, you understand me. And you personalize. And I think that's what this communication is about as well, is it's not a survey's like the company's asking me. Joyous is like my manager's asking me, or an individual that I see on the other end is asking me. So it's not just engaging the workforce, but it's engaging the workforce personally, which I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting points in there, right? The first one is that, we're open feedback, right? You can see who you're having, where your feedback's going. You can see who's responding to your feedback, which is the opposite of traditional feedback. Traditional feedback being, certainly HR-led feedback, being very much about anonymity. And of course, anonymity is really important if you're trying to, identify harassment or an unfair work environment or something. But it's not useful when you're trying to improve the install of a fiber modem, is it? You want to have a conversation, and you can't have a conversation with an anonymous figure, right? I think that's been one of the things which we've really noticed. The other part, though, which you mentioned there, is interesting to me, which is that this is an effect I never expected to see, but unions have always been about collectivism, right? That's solidarity, right? And it's an important force in the world of work. It's shaped a lot of how work is today. And when we initially started Joyous, I had this kind of concern that we were very much about the individual, because we're having individual conversations. But the thing which I love is if you actually go into lots of those conversations, people will tell you about problems that happen for other people or challenges they think other people might have or other people in their team or whatever. There's this real kind of openness. So it's not just this sort of thing of, actually, we're trying to talk to individuals. It does really feel like you're starting to have a much more collective conversation. Do you notice that, Nate?
Absolutely. It's folks today are used to communicating via SMS. I think if you went back 30 years, folks would find it weird. But now I don't think anybody does. I think everybody feels like that's the way I communicate. I don't have time to have a phone conversation with you because I'm doing work, but this asynchronous conversation I can put it down and pick it up and continue that conversation is really valuable today. And I'm associating with you. And I think that's the big difference is when it's a person, as soon as you personalize an interaction, you can't turn that person into them, because now it's Mike or Nate I'm communicating with. I'm not communicating with management or them, right? And I think once you bring it down to a personal level, you'll find people are willing to share and be more open.
Yeah. I'm assuming, and maybe you can talk me through the campaign here, but I'm assuming that, generally speaking, if you're a field service tech, that person driving around in a van, you're not actually communicating with that many of your peers that often. Yeah. So maybe just talk me through an example of how you kind of overcome that.
Yeah, I think when you have a campaign, so let's say with our technicians, we say, we're launching this new tool. that allows them to do self-testing. It's something they've been asking for. They don't want to have to call into a center to test. They want to be able to do it themselves. So we put the tool together and we test it, and we have some people test it and they say it's great, but we roll it out. And typically we don't follow up. We wait till we see people aren't using it or something like that. And then we try to go find out what's going on. But we send a campaign out and immediately it's, well, my phone's not compatible. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, we have the wrong OS. We didn't test it on 12 different varieties of phones. And so we've disenfranchised some of our technicians. Or, hey, why couldn't you put this button here? Or can you make it work like this? And I have to go in here and log in twice. And all of a sudden you're getting this rich feedback and you're solving problems, and everybody knows somebody's helping solve theirs. And so now you have peers going, hey, you're helping me.
Yeah,
and I
that's
think
interesting,
you
isn't
get
it?
that sense of we're in this together on all sides. We're just people trying to make things work for our customers, for one another, right? And for the business. And that's what you get down to when you get down to that level.
Yeah, I mean, if it's working well, right, you're going to make life better for the folk working, you're going to make life better for customers, and you're going to hopefully impact the top line or the bottom line, right? It's funny. I always see this. You can do a business case that says, hey, here's the dollars that you could save by running a campaign, and that's good. It always stands up with Joyous. But also innately, you talk to most senior people and you say, hey, there's a whole bunch of expertise and understanding about your actual real challenges that's just locked up 4, 5, 6 layers down in the organization, and we can go and unlock that. And that just, I always find the more senior a person is, the more naturally they just get that as a fact. That's a thing.
Yeah, because the manager, the lowest level, you hear it unvarnished all day, every day. And
Right.
nobody pulls punches, nobody sugarcoats it for you. They tell you like it is. When I was in a crew, the folks told it like it was. But as
Yeah.
you go up, everybody's careful about what they say and how they say it. They don't want to get anybody in trouble. They want to say anything that might make them look bad or negative or something like that. And so people become more and more guarded in what they say the higher up you go, which is why you've got all these analogies of the further up you go, the less, because folks won't tell it to you.
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? And so, yeah, if you want to get those, you want to get the most useful conversations, the most unvarnished conversations are the most useful conversations. Certainly if you're just a data nerd, that is the best conversation, right? But I guess you need to make sure those conversations happen right down at that level for someone like yourself that has the empathy for a day-to-day of those jobs, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I love asking this of customers, and we're getting towards the wrap. Where do you want Joyous to head in the future? You've seen us through 2 clients now, and you've seen us obviously right through our growth curve of tech. What do you want to see in the future?
So as I think about where things are going and where generative AI is going and how everything's data driven, and we're going to be talking about, virtual twins, if you will, and access to data at an unprecedented level with processing compute power that we've never had before to manage it. I think about a time where today we have to go manually figure out our operational data and then come up with where do we want to campaign and who should we send it to and how should we process it. I look forward to a time where Joyous is connected to our data, to everything we do, and it's using AI to say to us, you need to go look here. Here's the campaign. So predictive, proactive recommendations on campaigns, and then using generative AI to go, well, hey, here's how you should present this. Now, we don't want to do it for you because you lose the human element, you'll lose the people. But to take some of the administrative work out of it, so the barriers to usage, the further they go down, the more people use it. So helping them craft the message. And so they just are in response mode. And then when it comes back, you already started using AI, but just imagine where it goes when generative AI is fully out there and available. The kind of insights you can get will be so much greater, and put those into even practice and recommendations. So I think it could take us from, you need to go this, by the way, we're seeing it in your data. You need to go focus in this area. Let's go get that information, bring it back. Now that data set can be used again for something else, and here's the answer, go fix this. It could just speed up the pace of business. That's where I see it going.
You're right on it there, right? That's adventurous, right? And I'll tell you, when we first built this, we had in our head, we wanted to 10x survey. Like we wanted to take this idea, I'm going to talk to employees and gather information. We want to make it 10 times better, right? And a lot of that was about making it conversational and making it useful for employees and all those sorts of things to do that. And then we moved our task to, okay, how do we make analysis 10 times better? You get out with this thing. It's like, it gets out into the world. And then it really, at the start, takes folk like yourself, Nate, to go, oh, what can I use this for? We almost would say to people, well, this is what it does. What do you want to use it for? And we still see that that's probably the challenge. That like, if you get into an organization, you say, hey, suddenly you have this power to connect with your frontline and actually get input into your operational issues or your transformation issues or maybe your customer problems or something like that. And people go, oh, that's amazing. I can't imagine how useful this power is going to be. Now, where shall I start? And that's the bit which is really, I think, the thing which you get on there. We have to really lean in to help people start. And we're getting better at using AI to actually construct conversation starters to have with employees that pass many, many tick boxes to do with how they're going to work as a question or a starter. But you want to get to this point where it's like you have a business problem and you go, okay, I need to know about this, and it does the rest. And then that starts the chain, because that will start building a data set. That will uncover more things where now we can lean into the model to go and say, oh, well, you should probably try and find out more about this particular thing and this particular thing and so on. Cool. Well, I'll write all that down and send it to the product team.
Sounds good. I'll give you a good 2 weeks to make it real.
Just in closing, I just have one last question. Going right back to when you were up the pole.
Uh-huh.
And do you think that is your superpower now? I'm just wondering, is that true? Like, it's the being up the pole that's a superpower as far as doing the work you do, or is it the really varied education background?
Well, I think I would say both. That experience that I had, you can't get it any other way. And it gives you such an appreciation for what's going on and how the work gets done. Then if you can never forget that. So every once in a while, I'll go out there, and I still have my old hooks in the garage, and I go out and look at them and go, I remember when they're only 2 inches long, and it's the only thing holding you on the pole besides your hands. And you go, even though you're up in the air, you're grounded when you go up as a leader. You stay grounded. You stay grounded to your roots. That has helped me see things in ways that I couldn't see them before. It's all those experiences you bring, but you got to be able to do something with it. And that really is my superpower, to take experiences and insights and feedback and create something with it and apply it to some new scenario. But that one there, I wouldn't trade for anything. And I would tell you, if I didn't have that experience, I may not have gone as far as fast.
That is absolutely fascinating. What a great way to wrap this up. Thank you so much for your time today, Nate, and thank you for your custom as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
This has been the Joyous Podcast, brought to you by Joyous, human conversations and AI analytics in one. Find out more at joyoushq.com. If you liked this show, make sure to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This episode of the Joyous Podcast was hosted by Mike Carden and produced by Kai Crow, Karen Rayner, and Brandon Berman. Thanks for joining us. And remember, everyone deserves to be joyous.